A customer sent me a screenshot last month with the subject line, "Your Singapore proxy is broken." The page in the screenshot was a product listing priced in American dollars with an American shipping estimate under it. He had bought a Singapore line specifically to see Singapore pricing. The line was fine. It was sitting on a shelf about 2 meters from where I am now, on a real Singapore SIM, answering every one of his requests from an address registered to a Singapore carrier. What was giving him American pricing was his own code. His HTTP client announced on every request that it preferred English as spoken in the United States, because that is the default the library ships with, and he had never touched it. The site believed the header and never bothered with the address. I get some version of that ticket most weeks. It is the single most common reason a geo-proxy appears not to work, and the proxy has nothing to do with it. Why I see this from both sides. I run mobile lines on carrier SIMs here. About $10 a month in data each, another $1.50 in modem depreciation, modems sitting on a powered hub in my flat. I also buy addresses in other countries every month for my own checking because I need to see what a page looks like from somewhere that is not here. So I get the complaint from customers, and I get exactly the same confusion out of my own scrapers, and I have spent enough hours on both to know where to look first. 5 things decide the page you get. The language headers your client sends. A preference the site stored on you during an earlier visit. The account you happen to be logged into. A country or currency parameter sitting in the URL. And last, the address you arrived from. The address is on that list. It is nearer the bottom of it than most people assume. Buying an address in a country buys you one of those 5 inputs. The other 4 are yours to get wrong, and most people get at least one of them wrong. The headers, which win almost everything. Your client sends a header on every request saying which languages you read and in what order of preference. A lot of sites treat that as the strongest thing they have because it comes from the person rather than being inferred about them. Someone sitting in Germany who reads English is genuinely better served the English pages. That logic is sound. The problem is that nobody sets the header on purpose. Browsers fill it in from your operating system. HTTP libraries fill it in with whatever the maintainer picked years ago, or send nothing at all. Headless browsers inherit whatever machine they happen to be running on. So you end up with a scraper running on a box in one country, through an address in a second, announcing a language from a third. The site gets 3 answers and picks one. It usually picks the header. I have watched this on a dozen or so retail sites now. Change that one value, touch nothing else, and the currency on the page changes. There is a second trap sitting in the same header. The full value is a ranked list with weights attached, so plenty of people set the entry they care about and leave the old default parked behind it at a lower weight. A site reading the whole list can still see the original preference in there and act on it. If you take one thing from this, before you buy a single address anywhere, print the headers your client is actually putting on the wire. Not the ones you believe you configured, the ones that leave the machine, the preference the site already stored. Second input is memory. Plenty of sites decide your region once, then keep the answer, a cookie, a value hung off your session. Sometimes a redirect to a country-specific hostname that then sets its own state and never reconsiders. After that, the address stops mattering because the question has been answered and nobody is asking it again. This is why the identical request works from a clean browser profile and fails from the one you have been using all week. The clean profile has no stored answer, so it gets classified. The old one gets handed whatever it was told in March. The fix is boring. Clear the jar, or give every geo its own profile that never touches another one, and watch the redirects. Because if request 1 sent you to a country-specific hostname, every request after that is aimed at that hostname, and no address is going to pull you back off it. The account beats the address every time. If you are logged in, the account carries a country of its own, a billing address, a region chosen at sign-up, a store preference buried in settings. That value wins. It beats the header and it beats the address because it is the one thing the site knows rather than guesses. People hit this hardest on storefronts and on anything with a subscription. They buy an address in a country, log into an account created somewhere else, and get the account's country served back at them. Correctly, the site is doing precisely what it was built to do. If your job needs a logged-in session showing another country, the account is the thing that has to move. On most platforms, that is a support ticket, not a setting. The parameter you are carrying all along. The fourth one is the dumbest and takes about 10 seconds to rule out. Plenty of sites put the region straight in the URL. A path segment for the locale, a currency parameter, a store code hanging off the query string. If that is present, it wins, because it is an explicit instruction and no site overrides an explicit instruction with a lookup. I have watched somebody spend real money on addresses in 3 countries while the target's own URL was carrying the wrong locale the entire time. What the site is actually reading, now the part sitting underneath all of it. When a site works out where you are, it is not reading your address. An address carries no location. There is no country field in it anywhere. What happens is a lookup. Your address goes into a commercial geolocation database and comes back with a country, a region, sometimes a city, and a confidence score nobody reads. Those databases get built out of registration records, the address holder files, routing announcements, latency measurements, and whatever else the vendor can buy or infer. They are wrong often enough to matter. Country level is decent, up in the high 90% on ordinary connections. City level is a different animal, and the vendors publish their own city accuracy figures, which sit well below what the marketing around city targeting implies. They also update on their own cadence. A vendor refreshes its data on some schedule. The site using it refreshes its own copy on another. And a correction filed by a network operator has to travel through both before it reaches the page you are staring at. So the same address can read 2 different ways depending purely on who is asking and when they last pulled. When sees a pansin read purely on who is asking and when they last pulled. A carrier does not hand every phone a public address. Hundreds or thousands of subscribers sit behind a single one through carrier-grade address translation, and that address gets registered at whatever the carrier calls its gateway. That gateway is very often a national one rather than a local one. So a line sitting physically in one city on a real SIM on a shelf I can point at gets looked up as a different city 300 kilometers away. Both of those facts are true at the same time. I have had a block of lines read correctly by one database and incorrectly by another on the same afternoon. Same lines, same carrier, same shelf, 2 answers. No provider controls that. I cannot ring a database vendor and ask them to move my shelf. The carrier files what it files, the vendors ingest on their own schedule, and everyone downstream inherits the result. Which means when a seller quotes you a city, what they are quoting is what a database happened to say the last time they checked. Set the headers on purpose. The practical part is short. Make your headers agree with your address. German address, German first in your language preference. If you are rendering pages, the time zone the browser reports wants to agree as well, because on a rendered page there is JavaScript reading it and comparing. The type of address barely moves this, by the way. A residential exit and a mobile exit go into the same databases and inherit the same failure modes, so pick your type for other reasons. Verify by reading the target page. Stop checking your geo on a lookup site. A lookup site queries a database, and there is no guarantee it is the same database your target queries. You get a green tick from one vendor while the site you actually care about disagrees, and now you are debugging something that was never the problem. Read the target instead. Pull the currency symbol out of a price. Read one fixed string and check what language it came back in. Read the shipping estimate, or the store selector, or whichever field only changes when the site believes you are somewhere specific. Then assert on it. I put that assertion inside the scraper, right next to the parse, and if the currency is not what I asked for, the run stops there. The alternative is discovering 4 hours and 80,000 rows later that every price you collected was the American one. By country, treat city as a rumor. I do not sell city-level targeting. When somebody asks me for a specific city, I tell them what the lookups currently say about the lines I have. And I put none of it in writing, because I cannot promise a database will still say that next month. City-level geo-targeting as a product category is mostly marketing sold on a number the seller does not control and cannot fix when it drifts. If your job genuinely needs a city, buy a few, look them up, keep the ones that read correctly, and budget for some of them wandering off later. What I got wrong. I spent 2 days and bought 4 extra lines in a country chasing a geo complaint for a customer. The actual fix was one header on his side. I had already invoiced him for the lines, so I refunded it, and the whole episode cost me a day of my time plus 4 lines I did not need. I also used to repeat city numbers off supplier sheets without checking them. Someone asked me to confirm a city on a line. I looked it up in 3 places and got 2 different answers back. I stopped quoting cities that week. What I cannot tell you which database any particular site uses. Some run their own, some buy a vendor feed, some use a signal I have no way of seeing from outside, and all I can do is infer from how the page comes back, which means I am wrong sometimes. I also cannot promise you that a line reading as a given city today reads as that city in 6 weeks. The full checklist, with the header values I set, and the way I assert on currency inside the scraper, is at proxyscraping.org. Subscribe for more on proxies.